Record. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Christina Clark Okarmus. My pronouns are she, her. I am the executive director at the Alabama Campaign for Adolescent Sexual Health. And I am going to be your speaker today. It just so happens that the fates have decided that I will also be sick during this presentation. Myself and the staff were at a training 2 weeks ago, and then Megan and I were at a conference last week, and so it was all up in the Pacific Northwest, and so we were out there for like 10 days. And as hard as I tried to not get sick, all the vitamins and masks, on the airplane and all that, I still managed to catch something. So the good news is it seems like it's getting better, but the bad news is it's going into a cough, and so hopefully I will be able to spare you all that situation today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slide deck, and we'll get started here. So now this is a bit unusual for us to do a talk where we're the ones talking, or we're the ones that are presenting, but this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart as the director and also as a parent, and also it's an area where we see so many parents asking us for more information, and so we just really wanted to address it ourselves. It also happens that October is Let's Talk Month. And so if you look up October Let's Talk Month, you'll see lots of great resources for parents and caregivers, because the intention of the month of Let's Talk Month is to get parents and caregivers talking with their young people about sex, relationships, healthy relationships, and consent, and all the things that go into those conversations that parents and caregivers have with their young people. So we titled this talk, Becoming an Askable Parent, How to Talk to Your Kids About Sex and Relationships. You could really insert caregiver for parent or grandparent or aunt, or whatever your role is with young people, how to become an askable adult for your young people that you work with or that you live with or love. Okay, so I am just going to give a quick little overview of who I am, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Alabama campaign before we get into our agenda. I did just want to provide a little bit of background on who I am, because I think that helps to just kind of show you how this presentation, like with the mind frame that this presentation was created. And I do not speak for even, everybody's opinions and beliefs of the Alabama campaign. I do speak for the organization as a whole, but I would say, we're all very different. We bring different perspectives to all of our different work. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about me. My name, again, Christina Clark Okarmus, she, her pronouns. I am a white cisgender woman married to a cisgender man, so I have that perspective. I am also the mother to a toddler, to a 3-year-old, so I have that perspective as well. I've been in sexual and reproductive health, which is what SRH stands for 12 years now, which is a little hard to believe, but I started with the Alabama campaign 12 years ago in September, so my anniversary just passed. I am a lover of books. I love to read, mostly fiction, and I am a big house plant connoisseur. I have so many, and also a big world traveler. I just added a couple additional states there with these travels that we just had. So that's, again, just to share a little bit about me, perspectives I'm coming from, and to say, like, not all our perspectives are the same. And I'm just looking, sorry, at a chat. Yes, Kara, I think if you are interested in becoming an Askable adult, this webinar still does absolutely make sense to you. I'm not sure how you might have gotten on our list for Michigan. We do some work with Moash, and so maybe that's how. But I think if you are interested in learning these skills, or if you have some training related to becoming an Askable adult, then this will definitely be worth your time. Will not be Alabama specific, that is to say. So that is a little bit about me. Okay, I don't know why our logo came up last there, but here you will see just a little bit about the Alabama campaign and the work that we do. You're going to see my lovely staff here on the right. That is Brittany in the center, Megan on the far right, and myself on the far left. This was at training a couple weeks ago. So we provide training and presentations for youth serving professionals, such as yourselves, on various topics related to adolescent sexual health, such as becoming an Askable adult or being an Askable parent, those kinds of topics, as well as a lot of others that you can find on our website. We also do a lot of resource distribution via tabling at health fairs and conferences. We do some advocacy work at the state level and also at the federal level. So educating our lawmakers on what they need to know about sex ed for young people and how it how directly affects young people in their states. And then we engage in a number of strategic partnerships that advance our mission. We also do some work with youth advisory councils. Again, this photo is, I'm in this photo and I think Megan is as well. Sorry, my chat box is covering. And we have some young people that we had the pleasure of going to the State House with earlier this year, doing some advocacy work. So we do some work with youth advisory councils. They certainly bring their youth voice and input into our work and make it all the more relevant for them and for you. And it's starting next year. We will begin to do what's called direct service, where we will be bringing certain programs to young people directly. So this is a new area for us. We traditionally or historically have worked with folks that work with young people, so youth serving professionals, but historically have not worked directly with young people. And so we're going to be bringing some great curricula to young people and their families, and you're going to learn a little bit more about that family curricula today, actually. So that is a little bit about the Alabama campaign. Moving forward, just a quick little agenda. I've already gone over my intro, Alabama Campaign 101. I'm going to tell you about our enduring understanding, which is just a fancy way of saying our overall goal for today and our objectives. We're going to do some value sharing or thinking about our values and then sharing if you're comfortable. We're going to use a framework called SCOPE. That is from a curriculum that we were just trained on called LIFT, which is linking teens and families. And so we'll tell you a little bit more about that. That's going to be one of our programs that we're bringing to Alabama in 2024. And then we'll do our evaluation and close. Does that sound good for anyone? If not, you are welcome to speak up, send me a direct message, just drop in the chat. And I'm going to keep moving, but that remains open if anybody has questions along the way. So our enduring understanding for today, you will leave with this belief that I have the ability to engage in tough conversations with my young person in a calm and respectful way that further deepens our relationship. And to get to that enduring understanding, participants will be able to identify at least 3 values related to sexuality that they want to share with their young person. Participants will be able to utilize the SCOPE framework to build connection with their young person and have tough conversations. And participants will take away at least 2 SCOPE tough talk tips to use with their young person. So those is our big overall goal or enduring understanding and our objectives for today. Do you want to give a content warning that we are going to be asking you, or I'm going to be asking you, to think about your own experiences related to sex and relationships. And maybe that's not something you're up for this morning, or excuse me, this afternoon, depending on where you are, I suppose. And so you're welcome. I won't be offended if you want to jump off the webinar if that's not something you're up for.
It's like the most horrible Like, would you read that font?
I
That's a
will.
pretty bad
Yes.
font.
Sorry. Yes, I will. Just
Well, at least
1
don't
second.
boldface it. Like,
Yeah,
if you're gonna do cursive, do cursive. If
Yeah.
you're gonna do boldface, do boldface.
yeah.
Well, I will read it and I will try to make that change.
I think they might be having a conversation between themselves. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they're talking about cursive and bold, like your slide is not in cursive.
Okay. I didn't know if it was showing up weird for somebody else.
Do we have the say? Brian made it sound like in the meeting today.
If y'all
They
could, if
just
you're
appear
not
on our
on
list of like who's teaching what, right?
mute, hang on here. Let me see if I can find who's not on mute. Here we go. Okay, I think I fixed that problem. So that's just a reminder if you're not on mute to mute yourself. Sorry about that. Okay. So I thought they were talking about slides, and so anyway, sorry about that. If somebody does have trouble reading the slide, please let me know. Oh, sorry about that, Megan. I didn't make you a co-host. Yeah, I'll do that in just a second. So anyway, content warning, back to the content warning. If you're not feeling up for thinking about this topic, or maybe it's traumatizing or has been traumatizing for you in the past, I won't be offended if you need to jump off. So the first thing I'd like you to just take a moment, take a minute. We're going to just take like 30 seconds for this. Think about how you learned about sex and relationships and who it was from. Was it from a parent, a grandparent, or another trusted adult, a friend, an older sibling? So just take a second, think about that. So hopefully you have that in your brain, who you first learned about sex or relationships from. And then I want you to think about what you learned about sex and relationships from that person or those people. Was it considered dirty? Was it a taboo topic? You never talked about it. Maybe it was religious based. Was it treated as special or sacred in a positive or a negative way? Or maybe it wasn't given much value at all. So just again, take about 30 seconds and think about what you learned about sex and relationships. Okay, and now last thing I want you to think about, I want you to think, however and whatever you learned about sex and relationships, was it helpful? Did it give you the tools and understanding you needed to enter into healthy and safe relationships? So was what you learned helpful? And so now I'm going to ask you to, if you want, pull out a piece of paper. Maybe you already have one. Or if you're taking notes on the computer, just jot down a couple thoughts you had. Maybe like one or two things that were impactful to you in thinking about this. And is there anyone that would want to share? There's absolutely no pressure here. I can share, but I want to leave space for folks if they do want to share.
I'll go ahead and fill a little space just because after all I've learned about comprehensive sex education and the way I stumbled through this process, I look back and feel extremely fortunate for the help that I got and where it came from and what it was. It was by no means complete. It was by no means, by today's standards, enough at all. but it was all accidental. Like the information that I got, a buddy of mine in high school about that first contact at some point handed me a condom. I no idea how I would have gotten through that without somebody just going here. And fortunate, I will say, is how I feel given the time and place that I came out of.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. Kara shared in the chat, sex was not talked about very much. If it was taboo and religious based. It was not helpful. I feel like I tell a lot of anecdotes about my upbringing in terms of sex and relationships. The one that I think is maybe the most humorous is that when I started my period, my mom sat me down, and I don't remember, I'm sure she said more than just this. She's on, I'm so sorry, Mom. But she said, now you have to be careful around boys. And that's all she said. And I mean, again, she might have said other things, but that was the thing that stuck. And all these years later, I'm like, what did she, I mean, I know what she meant by that, but like, how did she think that that would be enough to get me from place A to place B, you know? So that's my little humorous anecdote. Any others that folks want to share?
I can share if you're wanting to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm in Utah. The predominant religion is Mormon, which of course I grew up in. So we were always taught that sex was only for marriage. It was a sin if you did it before marriage. And if you did anything sexual, you had to repent and go through a whole process, whatever. Surprisingly, I worked at this sandwich shop when I was a teenager, and one of my older coworkers sat me down and like handed me a condom, and at this time I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
Like, if you ever have sex, use this. And I was like, okay. So she kind of like proceeded to tell me how to use a condom. So I think at that time I was going away to college, and that's when things happen. And then I also learned a lot from the internet, which is always so great because back then they didn't have as many good resources as we have now. Never once talked about it within my family. My parents never, even when I got married, they never sat me down and talked to me about sex. And then I never learned much about healthy or safe relationships until I got into sexual health. So I kind of learned on the job, which is interesting. So yeah, it's kind of been a self-taught progress for me with sexual health. So it's been interesting.
A self-taught journey. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is interesting for sure. Thanks for sharing. And I think I may not have really learned about healthy and safe relationships either until I was in this job. Fortunately, I had a pretty healthy relationship to look to at home, healthy and safe relationship to look to at home, but I didn't, experience that myself until later in life because I didn't, learn about it. So thanks for sharing. Okay, so I'm going to move us forward, but again, feel free to drop things in the chat or interrupt me as we go on. So again, if you have that piece of paper out, I'm going to put up a series of words, topics, I guess, and I want you to just choose one or two and think about, if it's not like your child or grandchild, but think if it's somebody you work with or young people in general that you work with, think about what you want to teach those young people about these different topics. And again, we only have time to talk about maybe one or two, but think about what you might want young people to learn about these different topics. So there's love, sex, marriage, gender, consent. What might you want them to learn about their body, masturbation, romantic relationships, same-sex relationships, and pregnancy and practicing safer sex. Again, this is adapted from an activity in the Linking Families and Teens curriculum. If you'll just take a minute and you can jot down a couple notes. Does anyone, again, no pressure, but if anyone wants to share, what is one thing that you might want your young person or a young person to learn about blank?
I think it's helpful if they get the message that kind of they're in charge of their own bodies, right? So along the lines of consent, or just, they're in charge of what happens to their bodies. And also, what's going with that? I forget. There was another thought, but I forgot it.
That's great. I love that. Bodily autonomy. That's definitely a example or as a value that we want to instill in our children. Most of us, I would think, would want to instill that. Kara shared concrete examples of what is safe/healthy. So in a romantic relationship, or really in any, friendship, any relationship, how to communicate and advocate for themselves. Their body belongs to them. So again, consent, autonomy. Other values that folks would want to impart?
I would say for myself, we have a 12-year-old daughter, and that concept of what to teach them has shifted so much over time. Like, it was basic biology, anatomy, and pieces and parts. And now that junior high is kicking in, that word consent's at the very top of my list, because I know what we've covered in the past, and I know the decisions and the reality of becoming more autonomous and what that means moving forward. So kind of a shifting target.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely in that puberty phase where they're learning so many different things and their brain is changing so much. Consent in their body is absolutely, and again, this list isn't even to say this is all the things you would want to teach your young people, or that you would necessarily talk to your young person about all these things. But we have values around all these things, whether we kind of think about them, or if we are just not thinking about them day to day, but we still have these values around these different things. I'm just seeing a couple things in the chat. So consent in their body, most importantly, that it is free of shame and stigma. I'm guessing you mean sex or sexual activity. Important to know how to communicate in person via internet, social media. Absolutely. Communication could definitely be added onto this list too, but it's an important component of any relationship. So you might be wondering why the heck we're talking about values and how it relates to, building that relationship with your young person and talking to your young person. But in reality, the research shows that young people really want to hear from their parents, and from particularly their parents, but other trusted adults as well, about sex and relationships. And that belief that they want, or not belief, that feeling that they want to hear from you follows them all the way into high school and past. It goes down a little bit, but it is the largest percentage during those early years and into through middle school, and then beginning in high school is when it starts to taper off a little bit. But up until that point, we have huge influence in our young person's life. And meanwhile, while we're imparting all of our wisdom on them, their brain is also dramatically changing during this time. This is where their prefrontal cortex is developing. That's the part of the brain that's responsible for decision making and self-control and their emotions, using judgment. So you just have this great opportunity in these early adolescent years, and even through, the later adolescent years, to use your influence for your young person and to share your values around sex and relationships, even if you don't know everything, right? A lot of times we hear that from parents. Well, I don't know what to talk to them. I don't know like all the right things, the medically accurate, or I don't even know where to start. And I would say it's not just one conversation, it's multiple conversations, finding time and place over the course of your times together, that builds this relationship and this ongoing conversation around sex and relationships. And so when we're, thinking about these values, one thing that they talk about in the LIFT curriculum is building the strong adult-child connection. And the way that they do it in the curriculum is through this process called SCOPE. So I'm going to move forward to that. But before I do that, I want to read Amy's comment out loud. So related to communication, one of the best lessons I learned as a young person and tried to teach others as a peer educator was acknowledging that talking about sexual activity with your partner might seem uncomfortable, but if you're not ready to talk about it, then you talk about it together, then you're probably not ready to engage in those activities. Yes, I thought about that a lot as we teach young people how to have these conversations, how to negotiate safer sex, how to negotiate condom use, how to negotiate saying no. That if they're not ready to have these conversations, they probably aren't ready to be engaging in those activities. And so I think that is an important thing for young people to understand as well, because these communications are so critically important and potentially life altering. So moving on, we're going to do a kind of a fun little thing here. So let me see here how best to do this. I would like you, I'm going to share my screen here in a second. I'm going to share a different screen, I should say. And you can do this on your computer or you can get out your phone. And you should all see a QR code on the right side of the screen. You can also see this web link, or you can join by text. So you can text, you can scan with your camera app on your phone, or you can just type the URL in your web address. But what I want you to do is I want you to write words that would be the ingredients that are needed to build connection between adults and young people. So brainstorm, what are the things that adults and young people need to build a strong connection? So one example, because this is kind of a, I don't know, I think you're thinking about emotions, or you should be thinking about like emotions, not necessarily activities, although activities could be in there too, but like trust. Trust is one way that we build connection with one another. So words like that. What are the ingredients needed to build adult-child connection? And you can do more than one if you have more than one. Great. It seems like you guys have all figured out how to use it, or most of you have. I'm seeing lots of responses. Again, just one more time, what are the ingredients, the quote unquote ingredients that are needed for adult-child connection? Give it maybe 30 more seconds. I am seeing our responses slow down, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of this. Well, actually, no, I want to show the responses. So let's see what we got here. Can everyone see the word cloud? Not seeing anybody say no. Okay, so trust is a big one that a lot of people must have said. Also compassion, empathy, respect, listening, understanding was another big one. Humor, I love that. Questions, agreements, nature, commitment, shame-free, judged. I don't know if that meant like not being judged or maybe that, if you see connection as a more negative thing. I was thinking of it as a positive thing, but depending on how you grew up, it might be that connection might be a little fraught. Open-mindedness was another big one. Time. So I love this. This is great. I am just going to exit out of this now. Thank you so much for participating in that little activity. What app did I use to do the word cloud? Yeah, I was just like looking for something this morning, but it's called wholeeverywhere.com. I'll just drop it in the chat. I'm sure there is a paid version. I am using the free version. wholeeverywhere.com. Great. So let me get back to my presentation. So yeah, we need all these wonderful things to build a healthy, strong connection between ourselves as the adult and our young people. And so also, sorry, I want to pull up the chat. I'm not missing anything. And so those were great things that y'all brought up, and trust was the number one thing that y'all brought up. And I think that's so great and needed. And young people need to be able to trust us too, right? We oftentimes as adults, we think of young people as we need, they need to either build our trust or, create our trust, or once they, abuse our trust, they lose it forever, or they lose it for a really long time. It's hard to build trust back. But the same goes for us too, as the adults in our life, when we maybe don't stick up for them in the way that they think that we should, or we don't take care of them in the way that they think we should, that trust can also be fractured. I just want to bring that out. So I'm going to introduce this idea of scope, which is support, communication, openness, protection, and encouragement. And again, this is brought to us from the LIFT curriculum. I just want to make sure I keep mentioning them. It's a great curriculum. We just went through the training a couple weeks ago. It is open source. So, open source, not meaning that anybody can edit it, but meaning that you can find it and utilize it online for free. You can pay to have some things printed or sent to you, but the curriculum itself is free. And so I just want to lift that up. And so support is telling your young person, I will help you reach your goals and grow into the person you want to be. Communication, I will express my feelings and ideas with my words and actions and listen as you express yourself. Openness, I will hear your voice, take you seriously, and respect your needs, thoughts, and opinions. Protection, I will hold you responsible to appropriate boundaries and enforce rules consistently because I want to keep you safe. And encouragement, I will show you warmth, give you my time, and dream of new possibilities for your future. So in order for young people to feel connected to us and us to feel connected to them, we need to have all of these ingredients, right? And you guys got to a lot of that in our word cloud. But we need not only all of these ingredients, but the proper amounts of all of these ingredients. So what would it look like? Let's say you had a lot of protection, but you didn't have a lot of the other things. You have a lot of protection, but not a lot of the other ingredients. What does that maybe look like between an adult and a young person?
An overbearing parent.
Yep, an overbearing parent, authoritarian, where it's just rules, and there's not any openness or discussion or warmth. What about there's too much openness and support, and not enough protection? What could that look like? So there's a lot of openness and support. They're really close with their young person. They talk about everything, but maybe there's no protection. There's no boundaries. So it could just look like there's a lack of boundaries. It could be that young person doesn't have anyone holding them accountable to behave in a way that they need to be safe. So we definitely need to have a healthy dose of protection in there. We don't want only protection, but we also don't want no protection. What if there isn't any encouragement? There's all these other ingredients are there, but there's no warmth, there's no giving of time, there's no dreaming of new possibilities. What could that look like?
I was just about to say a lot of control.
Yeah, there could be a lot of control. There could be struggling with, maybe that young person would struggle with self-esteem, or kind of feeling like their dreams are possible, or that their parent is really wanting not just what's best for them, but like what their young person actually wants. So there needs to be all these things in the right doses to make it work, to make that connection strong and to build it. So we're going to use scope to have some tough talks. I'm just going to give some real quick guidelines, and then we'll do a couple scenarios. So the first is not to worry about doing it right. There's no such thing as doing it right. There's no such thing as perfection. You're going to have tough talks. Some are going to go off the rails. Some are going to be great. It's okay to make mistakes and apologize to our young people. That shows that we can be vulnerable with them. That again builds that trust. So don't worry about doing it right. We think it's important to use the correct names for body parts. So nicknames, slang terms, metaphors, usually only confuse us and other people. And so if we want our young people to feel confident, maybe talking to a healthcare provider in the future, we want to use the correct name for body parts. And it also contributes to having that shame-free environment that we're hoping to cultivate. Using everyday moments to spark conversation. So it doesn't have, again, we really don't believe in a sit down and have the talk. These talks, multiple, plural, should be happening throughout our lives. Ideally, as soon as you feel like topics are becoming available to them. So talking about consent, about can I hug you? Can I give you a kiss? Can I hold your hand? Even at a very young age. Talking about private parts and privacy, even at a very young age, all the way up through, their later adolescent years. So that can be through talking in the car, talking while after you've watched something on television or you've heard some song lyrics. Just everyday moments can bring those things up. We think it's important to remind parents to stay calm. Maybe you need to take a deep breath before you answer a question. Sometimes these questions can, really catch us off guard. We're not expecting to, answer, Mommy, where do babies come from? Like right in that moment. So take that deep breath. Remember, again, don't worry about doing it right. Ground yourself in whatever way is helpful for you. Or remember your tone, your body language, all eye contact, all the things. Avoid making assumptions or jumping to conclusions. So this is important because your young person might bring up something that they are not interested in doing. Maybe it's just something they've heard on the playground. Maybe it's something they've heard in the locker room and they don't know what it means. And so they come to you, their trusted person. And if you make the assumption that they're engaging in that activity or they're thinking about engaging in that activity, that can be the wrong assumption. You know what they say about assumptions. So let's not make them or jump to conclusions. Absolutely thank them for talking to you, even if it's something that you don't feel like you can address right away or you're uncomfortable addressing. That's a really good question. I'm so glad you asked. I remember having these same questions when I was your age. I'm feeling a little uncomfortable, but I'm glad you felt safe to come talk to me. Let me think about that before I answer you. Those are all great things that you can say to your young person. Ask questions to make sure you understand them. I always think of the little anecdote. I think it's just a joke, but the little kid that asks like, where was I born, or how was I born, or maybe it's something like that. And the mom like goes into all this detail about how a baby's made and born, and the kid's just like looking at her and is like, I just meant like where, like was I born in Michigan? You know, and so we just need to like make sure, ask those clarifying questions. Are you asking? Let me make sure I understand what you're asking about, you know, make sure you're clarifying. You don't have to give them more information than what they're asking for, especially if you're uncomfortable. Keep it simple in the same way. You know, you don't have to give them more information than what they're asking for, but don't avoid the subject. Don't be dishonest or disingenuous, or say things like, you're too young to know that, or where did you hear that? You know, you want to keep it simple, but you want to keep it open. If you kind of bash down their curiosity, then they're not going to be able to come to you in the future. Again, going back to our values, it's absolutely okay to share your values and ask for theirs. You know, I think this is the part where being open with one another and communicating really comes into play, because our young person might not think the same thing as us when we, you know, once they dig into it, or they might think the same thing as us for a while. And then when they get older and they have more experiences in the world, they might change those values, and that's okay. We're there, we should be there to support our young person, you know, regardless of where they are with their values, and to provide them the safety and support that they need. Always try to respond, even if you can't respond exactly in that moment. Oh my gosh, that's such a good question, but it's actually, you know, we're getting ready for bed and you just asked me this very deep question. Can we talk about it in the morning? Or I don't have the answer for that right now. Let me look it up. Or even better, I don't have the answer for that right now. Let me show you where we can look it up together. So, you know, showing them how they can use the internet for good. And then, of course, knowing your limits. There are some things that you, as an adult, as a parent, might always want to keep personal. You might not want to tell your child how they were conceived, you know, or what your sexual preferences are. That's totally fine. And you shouldn't feel like you have to share that with your young person. So know your limits, know whatever your boundaries are and where you're wanting to stop. And maybe part of that boundary is like, you know, I understand that you're engaging in sexual activity and I want to make sure you're safe, but I don't need to hear like details about it. Maybe that's part of the boundary. So those are just things that you want to think about. And again, we're utilizing scope. And so this is all these different ways that we can use these tips that will still build connection with our young person. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left, but I'm going to read a few scenarios and we'll get through as many as we can. We have 3. We'll see if we can get through them. And so I'm going to read the scenario and then I want you to think about how you would handle it. And I have the tips, so we'll go back to the tips as soon as we read the scenario. So your teen mentions that their friend is dating someone who is much older than them. You ask your teen what they think about their friend dating someone so much older. They seem unsure and ask you, what's the problem with dating someone older? So just sit with that for a second and then I'll go back to the tips. Okay, so recognizing that there's no doing it right, what are some thoughts that folks have about how they would want to have that conversation in a way that continues to build our connection with our young person? How do we want to have that conversation?
I will say for myself, the first one is stay calm. Always stay calm.
Yeah, that's a big one on this one.
Well, and one with an age difference. It's something I do a bunch of work with the scouts, and there's a lot of information shared with us as leaders working with children that necessitates follow-up inquiry about especially age gaps between contact, that any other reaction will cut off any further information that may be necessary to follow up on that.
Yeah, so you're thinking of it not only as a parent but also as a person who is trying to keep other young people safe.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And probably a mandated reporter, I'm imagining.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're thinking about it from different, so you absolutely do have to stay calm, find that breath, that grounding, whatever you need to do. What other things?
I think like what Russell was saying, you have to ask a clarifying question, like to some, depending on the age of the child, a big age gap might be 2 years, where another kid, a big age gap might be 5 years. So getting, asking a clarify question, and then putting it back on the kid and saying, well, what do you think about that? How does that make you feel? What do you think? Why would you think that would be okay? I mean, so actually getting more, like he was saying, getting them to tell you more before you start making assumptions or giving information about a topic that you really don't know. Cause like there's 2 years isn't a big age gap for some ages, but it's a big age gap for some, 14 to 16 or 16 to 18, like it just depends. So.
Right.
I think to like, yes, and I agree with everything Tina and Russell just said. I actually recently had a conversation like this with my 15-year-old son. And one of the things that like, as we kept discussing it, I was like, how did you act at 14? Like, how do you see a difference between yourself at 15 or, 15 now and 13 or 12? Instead of just being like, there's brain differences and maturity differences. Like we kind of took that, broke it down and like, how do you see yourself as different? How do you think a relationship would be different? And kind of letting him lead through some of those differences instead of just hitting him with like, because my first thought was like brain development and this, and like that's where I went. Emotional maturity. And so like letting him lead that, but asking some of those questions that maybe took it down that road and identifying some of those ways that would be difference between those ages, like for themselves, before bringing it back out to like, okay, now if you were in a romantic relationship and you're both thinking differently or acting differently, and how would that affect that relationship, and what could be some of the things that would be at risk, and hoping like adding in some of my values as we talk through it, but letting them lead that conversation through their own discovery and looking at their own development, because I think kids always want to feel older and grown up, and they're really able to think about what was I at 12, 13, 14, 16.
Yeah, they really do always want. I mean, I remember that about myself. Like I always wanted to be older than I was. And I wish, I shouldn't say I wish. My parents used to tell me all the time, like, you have so much time to be an adult. Like, just be a kid now. Just be a teenager. Just be whatever. But yeah, that is something that young people really want, is to be grown. Yeah, Megan. Yeah. Yeah. So that's, it's a tough topic, talking about that age different. That age, you're 14 and your friend's 14 and they're dating a 19-year-old. Man, talk about an age gap, not even getting into the legalities or anything else, but like, what is a 14-year-old doing that's so different from it? Or what's a 19-year-old doing that's so different from a 14-year-old? They might be graduated from high school. They're probably driving. They probably have a job. Just so many different life experiences between a 19-year-old and a 14-year-old that are important to think about. So yeah, I think, and then, I think is another one where it would be good to avoid making assumptions or jumping to conclusions just because that's what that friend is doing. Maybe after you share your values, your young person isn't going to want to do that, or maybe they have no intention of doing that. They just wanted to know your opinion, or to share with you. So things to think about. All right, I'm going to go to the next scenario. So you've had a few conversations about your values around birth control over the past year with your teen. You're finishing up washing the dishes one night when you get a text from your teen saying they need to go to the clinic to get birth control. Sit with that for just a moment. And now think about and talk about, if you feel up to it, how might you approach this using the SCOPE framework?
I would say for me, that would be a point to ask questions, like an understanding that they may think plan B is birth control versus being put on something preventative is different than reaction to.
Yeah. Yeah, making sure you understand this question, I think, is really important. And also making sure you don't make assumptions, because they might be wanting to get on birth control. When we were role playing this during our training, the person who was playing a young person was like, well, you know, I really am struggling with my acne, and my friends told me that birth control can help with acne. And so instead of, as a parent, assuming that this young person is engaging in sexual activity, avoiding those assumptions and getting all the information. But also, yeah, making sure that they have an understanding of their options. And there are some options out there that are for, you know, in case you had an oopsies or an accident, or, you know, something happened, versus something that's preventative. Kara put in the chat, thank you for letting me know. Tell me more about why you need to go right now. I think that's good. And what is the urgency behind your request? Maybe asking if they've done any research on it, and maybe thinking about other alternatives depending on what they want it for. Yep. Yeah, so if they want it for acne, maybe that's not the best option for them. Maybe there's other options out there that they could talk with the dermatologist about. Maybe your value is that you're not comfortable with your young person taking hormonal birth control. And that's legitimate. You know, we don't have I don't know that we have any real research on the long-term effects of birth control. So that's a legitimate, you know, feeling to have, value to hold. And so telling them that, but ultimately understanding and giving them, you know, all their options, but understanding that they may make a different decision or have a different value than you, I think is important too. Even if ultimately you decide, no, I don't want you to get on this hormonal birth control, having that open, honest conversation is helpful. Anything else? Oh, thanks for sharing, Kimmy. I haven't seen, and maybe, yeah, there is probably a ton of misinformation out there. If anybody has research that they could recommend related to long-term effects of birth control, feel free to send them my way. I'll share my email here in a couple minutes. Make sure that make sure they know you support their decision, but there needs to be discussions about the pros and cons of all the different types. Absolutely. Okay, last one. We have about 5 minutes left. And I do want to note, Megan did just drop in the chat our webinar evaluation form. If you have to jump off early, would appreciate you filling that out. So last scenario, some of the friends your teen brings home are laughing and discussing things that happened at school today. You can't hear everything, but you can tell part of the story is about some teens making fun of another student who might be gay. You wait until the friends are gone to talk to your child. So sit with that for a moment. And then think about how you might want to have that conversation. What could that conversation look like? So this is a little bit different from the other two because you're going to them with something you've overheard. You certainly don't want to be accused of overhear, you know, eavesdropping or whatever. But you've overheard this conversation that you want to know a little bit more about. Maybe you want to make sure that your child's not bullying, that some of the values they've instilled in them about kindness are being carried forward. So they're not asking you a question. You're really using this as a moment to talk to them. So maybe something like, hey, I heard you guys talking about something about one of the kids at your school. Can you tell me a little bit more? I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. You guys were just talking loudly, or I was in the kitchen. You were right there in the living room. So I heard a couple of things, but I was curious what you guys were talking about. They might not want to talk to you about it. Or they might, open up. Any thoughts about this one?
I have little ones, like I'm thinking of a situation when my kid was like 5 or 6, and just saying something like that, and also saying, like, I could have misheard, I might be misunderstanding, I heard this word, I heard that word. If you don't want to talk about, I just want to give you the blanket reminder to please be kind to your friends. You don't know what other people are going through.
Yeah,
It just kind of the blanket, like, be good to other people message if they're not going to get into depth with you.
yeah, that's good. I also like what Kara just said. I heard you guys laughing about something that happened at school today. What was so funny? That's a really like low stakes way of approaching it. Like, because laughter, you don't necessarily have to be eavesdropping to overhear laughter. Like, that can be really loud. And so, what was so funny? You guys were laughing about whatever. I like that a lot. Okay, so we are at time. I just want to remind you once again to please fill out the feedback form. That's really helpful for us in developing future webinars. I hope that this was helpful for y'all. And if it wasn't, please put that on the feedback form. Say, I know I need more information on this specific thing. I'm totally, my feelings will not be hurt. If you can just, provide that sort of constructive feedback, just so I can know what you do need or what wasn't helpful. And you can always reach out to me via email too. So if you didn't put it in the feedback form, you can also reach out to me via email. You can also find us on most of the socials and on our website. So thank you all so much for being here. And I hope you have a great rest of your, hopefully it was a short work week for you, but if not, a great rest of your Tuesday and the rest of your work week.